Today is Friday, November 3rd, 2023. It's time for our Intelligence Community Roundtable with my dear friends Larry Johnson and Ray McGovern. Ray, I want to start with you. What kind of a fool is Secretary Blinken making of himself since the Israeli Hamas conflagration began on October 7th?
Well, to those who know something about the background, the fact that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict did not start in a vacuum, as the Secretary General of the UN has said, he's making a fool of himself. This is going to get worse, and it's going to get still worse if the American people continue to be deceived by the stakes here and about who is in charge of the genocide now, not the terrorism.
As we speak, Secretary Blinken, Ray, is in Israel trying to persuade Prime Minister Netanyahu to order a pause. I guess that's a euphemism for a temporary ceasefire so that humanitarian aid can be brought into the people that they're about to kill. Larry, who's winning the PR war here? Israel, Hamas, the U.S.?
Yeah, no, Hamas and the Palestinians are winning it. It is appalling what is just happened today. The Israeli Defense Forces attacked civilians standing outside the Al-Shifa hospital, killed several. And then there was a column of civilians walking and in vehicles that were going south as requested by the Israelis. And they were civilians. They were not carrying weapons. They were bombed and killed. Their bodies are littered over the highway. Now, these images keep coming out day after day. I don't add to that images of a dead Palestinian child cut in half, her father holding her and wailing. Then another child being pulled out. Looks like they're wearing white flower makeup because they've been buried in this concrete road. These images are continuing to emerge. They're not manufactured. They're not ginned up by artificial intelligence. They're real. They reflect the fact that the Israelis are killing civilians.
The slaughter that Larry described, and I think it was a fair description, can only be tolerated for so long, given the Arab and Palestinian populations of the countries around Israel. So my question is, what happens next? The American Secretary of State, himself Jewish, takes 3 days to beg Prime Minister Netanyahu for a pause. We can talk about what that means. It's insufficient, obvious. He doesn't even want to stop to allow 5 trucks in, let alone 50 or 500, says no to his face. The slaughter continues. President Erdogan is riling up 1.5 million people in a talk that he gives at a public square in Istanbul. At some point, something's got to give, Ray.
The world has been divided right into now with the lily white West and NATO as its embodiment and the U.S. and Israel as its presence in the Middle East. Bottom line, Israel could not do this without full support from the United States. We are the primary people to blame.
Larry, what happened on the evening of October 7th and the morning of October 8th when the Israeli Defense Forces reached the kibbutzim that had been attacked by Hamas on the morning of October 7th?
They used tanks and aircraft to bomb the houses that contained both Hamas fighters and Israeli hostages. The evidence of this is pretty overwhelming, and it's not from a Palestinian source. It's from Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, and they've got other Israeli citizens on the record citing what happened. So Israel, in the immediate aftermath of this attack on October 7th by Hamas, which was, it turns out to be a well-planned military operation, they attacked both Israeli military outposts and also took kibbutzim in order to take hostages. and they would use the hostages to exchange them for prisoners, as they've done in the past. Israel was caught so unaware, so surprised, that they were both humiliated and they reacted without regard for human life, and then proceeded to blame all of the burned, charred bodies of Israelis in these buildings on Hamas, when in fact, the destruction that was caused, Hamas did not have a tank or an aircraft that was dropping 500-pound bombs or JDAMs. Only Israel had those, and the houses reflected damage that could only be caused by Israeli defense forces.
So someone from Prime Minister Netanyahu to a commander on the scene, somewhere in that chain of command,
correct,
ordered the Israeli Air Force and military to attack and kill Israeli citizens in order to kill at the same time Hamas that was there.
Right. And then, in fact, you had Israeli helicopter pilots who were flying, I think, Apaches, which are attack helicopters. They admitted they were firing on vehicles that were fleeing from that rave, that desert rock festival. And they had no way of knowing who was in the car or who wasn't. And in fact, they did end up killing Israeli kids. And yet the audacity of this is that Israel turns around and blames it all on Hamas and proceeds with the lie that Hamas beheaded 40 babies. Well, you know what? Give me the list of the names of those babies. You haven't seen a single grandparent show up on television anywhere saying, have you seen my grandson or my granddaughter? Because grandparents are fierce when it comes to their grandchildren.
Larry, which is more likely to happen? A diplomatic solution to this or a widening regional war?
The war is going to widen. His trip to Netanyahu, he tried to, as they said, a pause, euphemism for ceasefire. And within 30 minutes, Netanyahu came out and basically told him, you can shove it where the sun doesn't shine. No. And so then Blinken's going to set off. He's going to go to Jordan and see if he can enlist the help of the other Arab nations to try to calm down the Hamas. They're going to show him the door as well. The United States has lost its credibility, and the problem is the masses of the people in the streets. Now, don't worry about the leaders. The fact that the masses of people in Turkey, in Syria, in Iraq, in Jordan, in Yemen, in Iran, and in Indonesia are becoming enraged more and more with each passing day as they see the images of these slaughtered children and these mangled bodies of women. It is not a military target, and it's not just a one-off. It's happening with increased frequency. They're going to fight back. This thing's going to get out of control, and I fear that millions are going to die.
We'll switch gears before we leave to the latest in Ukraine, because in that same right after that clip, Secretary Austin, cut 4, Chris, said the following about Ukraine. This is mind-boggling. Under oath.
Yet even as we surge support into Israel, we remain focused on Ukraine. Nearly 20 months into Putin's failed campaign of conquest, the Russian military has been badly weakened. Ukraine's brave forces have taken back more than half of the territory seized by Russian invaders since February 2022. And that was made possible by bipartisan and principled U.S. leadership in our coalition of some 50 allies and partners.
Read just like Victoria Nuland wrote it for him, Larry.
Yeah. Now, listen, he's displaying a level of stupidity that's appalling in someone who occupies the role of Secretary of Defense. The Russia's losing. Russia says, boy, if this is losing, we want more of it. They've been advancing steadily over the last 4 weeks. They completely stopped the counteroffensive in its tracks. It didn't even breach the first line of 3 lines of defense over a 5-month period. Now, if if that's what Austin's definition of success is, it helps explain why he doesn't understand that there's no difference, that there are differences between male and female. He's just quite comfortable with transgender. He'll accept any kind of nonsense that's presented to him as long as he gets to keep his job and ensure that when he gets done, that they'll welcome him back to Raytheon.
The denouement is in prospect. It's going to happen within the next month. What are Biden and Blinken and Austin going to do when it's shown that they've been lying about Russian losing, that they've have to now accept the fact that the Ukraine has lost? Are going to redouble? They're going to send 60 billion more money. It's crazy, and it's all going to come to a head before the election, and that's the wild card here. I don't know what Biden and his crew will be tempted to do because they have a personal stake in not losing the war, not losing the election.
Our U.S. bases that are in Syria and shouldn't be in Syria and in Iraq are being attacked on a daily basis with increasing frequency, and it's not being reported in the media, and it's not being reported out by DOD. They're keeping it quiet. But I've heard from people who have seen what's going on, and they said it's getting worse, not better. And so then you look at what's going on in Ukraine. Just it is so dangerous because in the process of underestimating Russia, these Ukrainians began believing their own propaganda. And so now they're left facing the fact that they've lost, and they're losing badly, and they're going to lose even more in the coming weeks.
Thank you, my dear friends. This stuff is never happy to discuss, but the audience and I deeply appreciate your candor and your insight. All the best. We'll see you next week.